Welcome to the 15th century, or at least the first part. I've made this one much shorter, and I've worked hard to edit it and edit out the singing in the chorus, so there's more in store to gorgeously inform and seldom bore us. This century starts with Timur, the Turco-Mongol warlord, descended from Genghis Khan, wreaking havoc with his drawn sword, and his abhorred horde of horsemen invading Georgia in 1400. Just before the sacking of Damascus, where victims were massacred. Then in 1401, in Baghdad, more attacks occurred, and he ordered his troops, on returning, to approach him with 2 savage human heads each, just to show him he envisioned the restoration of the Mongol Empire, and as Genghis Khan's heir, he wished to ascend higher. Known as the Sword of Islam, he massacred millions in South and Central Asia, the Caucasus, dominions of southern Russia, Syria, the Golden Horde, the Mamelukes of Egypt. This nomadic warlord was also known as Timur the Lame. In a battle in his youth he gained this nickname. While raiding sheep, historians claim the pain and shame still lingers. An arrow left him limping and missing 2 fingers. But woe betide any who applied this name. Whoever dared would end up in a pyramid or tower of 7 heads. But that aside, his mastermind cannot be denied. The most powerful ruler of the Muslim world. In 1404 he died. And 16 years later it was written in history, the introduction and construction of the Forbidden City, the center of Chinese imperial power for 500 years. From the Ming to the Qing it persevered, with 9,999 rooms, palaces and chalices, eunuchs and tombs. It was called the Forbidden City, as entry was unauthorized to all except the emperor, his family, servants, otherwise instant execution. But who could be so stupid to jump the moat and scale the walls, architects concluded. The hall of supreme harmony, the palace of earthly tranquility, exudes a mood of sublimity and respectability. But deep within the city there were draconian measures, the most fiendish and squeamish of which was known as the 3 treasures. Not gold, myrrh and frankincense. Each year the emperor ordered to see the jar in which eunuchs stored their reproductive organs, just to prove they were still eunuchs and they hadn't grown back. They were known as the 3 treasures, a little known fact. Castration was immaculation in China and was commonplace for civil servants, bodyguards, criminals and slaves. Incapable of having children, incapable of starting a dynasty, and without sex drive, the emperor could confide in them with his concubines implicitly. They had access to the emperor, unlike Confucian scholars who suck up to him. One rose up within the ranks, the 3-jeweled eunuch. With a voice like a bell, in height 7 feet, I am the Lord High Admiral of the Ming treasure fleet. Behold, we will impose control of the Indian Ocean, expand our tribute system, and put into motion a fleet complete with 300 ships, some longer than aircraft carriers, treasure ships and equine ships, 5-masted warships like warriors. When winds prevail, I will set sail to Java, Brunei, Siam, India, Arabia, Africa. Zheng He, Fleet Admiral, I am. So trading for porcelain, silk, and other riches, his treasure ships swelled with zebras, giraffes, ostriches. It's daft, in fact, this novel giraffe of Zheng He's arc was expression of young Law's accession to the imperial throne. In short, his mandate of heaven. No one had seen a giraffe before, so when Zheng He presented her, they were reeling with the feeling that it was a mythic Qilin which legitimized the rule of the emperor. And when he failed to persuade by trade, he waged war until they obeyed. Against Ceylon, Arabia, Africa, and the fearsome pirates who plagued the Southeast Asian seas, and 1424 saw the death of Emperor Yonglor. His successor refused any longer to sponsor the voyages of Zheng He. But the memory of this 7-foot fleet admiral is immortalized in temples in Jakarta and Semarang, in monuments, mosques, underwater mountains, and when you look through the romance of the 3-jeweled eunuch. Now 5 years later, in In the siege of Orleans, the English were defeated, documented historians, by Joan of Arc. Essentially, you may remember my 14th century and the Battle of Crecy, fought in 1346, which saw victory for Edward III and his son, the Black Prince. It was the 100 Years' War, well actually 116, between France and England, spanning 5 generations of kings. Ever since William the Conqueror, English kings had owned lands in Burgundy, Normandy, Aquitaine, the whole of France, and in 1414, Henry V was at it again, demanding 3 million crowns, a French wife, Aquitaine. The French gave a dowry of 600,000 for Catherine, Charles VI's daughter, terms which Henry found mocking and shocking, but Charles VI, the Dauphin, thought were generous, not treacherous. We must dismiss those tennis balls. That's Shakespeare's myth in Henry V. Dramatic license, that is all. So Henry V sailed to France, just like Edward III. But unlike Edward, he besieged and seized, in 1415, Harfleur. This led to the most momentous event of the 100 Years' War. Henry V defeating the French at the Battle of Agincourt. And just like Edward, his men were outnumbered, but the English had long known they would prevent the French comprehensive offensive with their English and Welsh longbows. The archers drove pointed wooden stakes into the ground to force the French cavalry to veer off. Then after confessions, Henry ordered his men to be silent that night or he'd cut their ears off. On St. Crispin's Day, the heavens opened, churning the terrain between the woodland into mud. So forceful was the rain. The French cavalry couldn't outflank them, and were in the darkest place, unable to charge through the archers and their palisade of sharpened stakes. Then, according to the sources, archers injured the French defenseless horses. Then the panicked horses galloped through their own infantry, scattering them and trampling them, almost instantly. The impact of thousands of arrows, crazy horses, heavy mud, resulted in an English victory. Whoever could have imagined 6,000 French dead and 2,000 prisoners? And that's what triggered this rise of Joan of Arc, the patron saint of France, a 17-year-old peasant girl who claimed she'd heard heaven's word, guided by visions to save France from domination, English intimidation, preaching liberation, teaching the demoralized French determination to fight against the English in Orleans, a demonstration of French defiance in the Loire, a transformation of French morale, and a validation of her holy visions and military decisions, and a disposition for national emancipation, crowning Charles VII the ruler of the nation, the ruler of the nation, the ruler of the nation. But after his coronation, Joan's participation in the failed siege of La Charité led to polarization, insubordination, condemnation, accused of heresy and blasphemy, demonization in a kangaroo court in Rouen. Her abomination was largely sartorial, in other words, the degradation of a woman wearing men's armor. Her victimization and burning at the stake meant her reputation was salvaged by Pope Pius II, who enhanced it when he claimed she was maid who saved the King of France. Rewind. He claimed she was the maid who saved the Kingdom of France. A saint of the Catholic Church, her beatification by Pope Pius X and later canonization, and her veneration as a martyr was a reinterpretation of virtue and sincerity, gender diversity, embraced as a challenger to masculinity and femininity, commemorated as a saint for her conviction and virginity. She has inspired suffragettes, feminists, novels, plays, cross-dressing comics, operas, computer games. Then in 1436, an architectural virtuoso, Brunelleschi, designed and built the Florentine duomo, Although no buttresses were used, indeed they were forbidden in Firenze, dismissed as Gothic ugliness, so his mission was to build an unsupported dome with bricks. It was ingenious. His herringbone brick pattern transferred the weight and inconvenience of the freshly laid bricks to the nearest vertical ribs, relying on intuition and the models that he built. A symbol of artistry and ingenuity of the Renaissance. Lo behold, it will not hold, the bystander's response. He wants to build a cupola with 4 million bricks. This pesky Brunelleschi, what wizardry and the tricks. It cannot be done. But he invents hoist machines and Lewisons, astounding Da Vinci and Donatello and anyone else who listens. And in 1438, the Incan ruler Pachacuti established Machu Picchu, famous for its natural beauty. Before the Spanish conquest stole their gold work and their booty, they would eat quinoa and maize, guinea pig and other food. He expanded his empire from the kingdom of Cusco, using llamas and alpacas to move goods which were too slow. Over 20,000 kilometers of road, often paved, and bridges over mountain gorges. What's-his-name would transport messages with knotted wool called quipu. Without a system of writing, Incas were not equipped to write written records for posterity and reference, so historians must rely on architectural evidence. Their intelligence and inventions, of course, only reveals that it's possible to survive without horses, irons, or wheels. Moving from Peru, Italy, France, China, the Caucasus, Korea has the final word. Of course it is the Korean alphabet, by Sejong the Great, managing to wangle Hangul in 1448. Korea had been using Chinese characters since antiquity, which were poorly suited and contribute to high illiteracy. Sejong didn't want to prolong this orthographic penitentiary, adopted by the commoners. The elite frowned on it for centuries. Graphically simple, it was accepted in enlightened circles, traditionally consisting of dots, straight lines, and circles. The 5 basic consonants are based, I must note, basically on speech organs, the tongue, the mouth, the throat. Of 14 vowels and 10 consonants it consists, and has obtained accolades from distinguished linguists. So that was the 15th century, from 1400 to 1450, which I wish to keep nifty and skip through swiftly. But if you want to hear of the Ottoman Turks and Tupac Yupanqui, the Union of Spain, Timbuktu, Sunni, Ali, Prince Dracula, Lorenzo de Medici, Rua Paksha, the Hindu city of victory, then tune in to the 15th century part 2. It will be just as swift and nifty as we march through it.